Imagine a weapon so powerful it can wipe out an entire city in seconds. A weapon that changed the course of history and redefined the meaning of war. This is the story of the nuclear bomb. In 1965, the American channel NBC aired an interview with a man who appeared visibly depressed and sad.
Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent.
This man was none other than Robert Oppenheimer, the scientist responsible for developing the first atomic bomb in history. This bomb was used by the United States to end World War II, devastating the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and demonstrating to the world the terrifying power of this new weapon, the nuclear bomb. After this event, nations began racing to acquire this horrifying technology. The Soviets were next, followed by the British, and then the French, who conducted their nuclear tests in an Arab country, specifically the deserts of Algeria. These deserts were transformed into a nightmarish landscape due to the brutality of the French nuclear experiments. To truly understand the nuclear bomb, we must first explore how it all began. The story starts thousands, perhaps millions of years ago, when humans were constantly searching for energy. Some sought energy for food, and some for travel. Over time, we used various methods to harness energy, such as fire, coal, and electricity. However, at the dawn of the 20th century, around 1900, humanity witnessed a significant industrial revolution, particularly in Europe and America. Factories were operating around the clock, leading to an unprecedented demand for energy to power these factories and machines. In 1934, an Italian scientist named Enrico Fermi proposed a groundbreaking idea. Fermi suggested that the atom, invisible to the naked eye, could release enormous amounts of energy. This idea seemed illogical at the time, but just 4 years later, in 1938, two German chemists discovered nuclear fission. Fission is the reaction in which the nucleus of an atom splits into two or more smaller nuclei, releasing huge amounts of energy. This discovery was both groundbreaking and terrifying, especially since it occurred in Germany during the Nazi regime under Hitler. At that time, Germany was preoccupied with other priorities. Less than a year after this discovery, Germany invaded Poland and subsequently occupied much of Europe, officially marking the beginning of World War II. As a result, the focus on nuclear energy began to fade in Europe due to the ongoing war. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the United States was deeply interested in nuclear energy. America was far removed from the conflict in Europe, which led many European scientists, especially Italians and Germans, fleeing the dictatorships of Mussolini and Hitler to migrate to the US. Among these scientists was Enrico Fermi, the Italian physicist who had proposed the idea of nuclear energy. In America, Fermi successfully achieved a nuclear chain reaction, the foundation of the atomic bomb. If a neutron is fired at a uranium atom, the atom splits into two smaller atoms, releasing more neutrons and energy. These neutrons then go on to split other uranium atoms, creating a chain reaction that releases an enormous amount of energy capable of destroying entire cities and killing people in seconds. This concept was personally warned about by Albert Einstein, the most famous physicist of the time. Einstein sent a letter to the US president, warning of the danger of Hitler acquiring such weapons. Although the US was interested in nuclear energy, it had not yet considered turning it into a weapon. This changed on December 7, 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, killing over 2,400 Americans and destroying much of the US Pacific Fleet. This attack was the primary reason for the US entering World War II.
I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
The Americans knew that this war was a fight for survival, as they were up against two of the most powerful nations at the time, Nazi Germany, which had occupied large parts of Europe, and the Japanese Empire, which had occupied much of Asia. As a result, the US decided to use nuclear weapons to end the war. In early 1942, the US began its secret project to develop the atomic bomb known as the Manhattan Project, led by American physicist Robert Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer, who had spent years studying in Europe and collaborating with many brilliant scientists, gathered a team of experts to work on the project. A secret city was built in the desert to house these scientists and engineers. After 3 years of continuous work, the Manhattan Project succeeded in producing a bomb with immense destructive power, but small enough to be carried by aircraft. On July 16, 1945, the first nuclear bomb, codenamed Trinity, was tested in the desert of New Mexico. Some scientists, including Oppenheimer, feared that the heat and energy generated by the bomb could cause hydrogen atoms in the atmosphere to fuse, creating a nuclear fusion reaction that could potentially destroy the Earth. At 5:29 a.m., the bomb detonated, creating the most powerful explosion in human history. The entire area shook. A fireball rose 12 kilometers into the air, and the steel tower holding the bomb vaporized. The heat was so intense that it could vaporize humans in an instant. Despite the horror, the test was a success. The US had officially become the first nation to possess a nuclear bomb and was ready to use it in World War II. By this time, Germany had already surrendered, Hitler had committed suicide, and Mussolini had been killed. The war in Europe was effectively over, but Japan refused to surrender. In the final years of World War II, Japan intensified its attacks on the US, sending kamikaze pilots on deadly suicide missions. At this stage, America had 2 options to force Japan into surrender. The first was a land and air invasion, but this was deemed impossible as the US was unwilling to endure further losses among its soldiers. Instead, they turned to a second option, one that would devastate Japan and assert American dominance without costing a single American life: the atomic bomb. On July 26, 1945, the US president demanded Japan's unconditional surrender, warning of prompt and utter destruction if they refused. The president did not mention the atomic bomb, so Japan did not fully grasp the threat. When Japan refused to surrender, the US dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, killing 80,000 people instantly. 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, killing another 70,000 people. Many more died later from radiation exposure, which caused cancers and other illnesses among the survivors. After the bombing, the US had planned to drop 7 more atomic bombs on Japan, but on August 15, 1945, Japan's emperor announced the country's surrender, effectively ending World War II. The world witnessed the destructive power of nuclear weapons, leading nations to race to acquire them. On February 13, 1960, France conducted its first nuclear test in the Algerian desert. The explosion was 4 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. This test led to widespread radiation exposure across Africa. France continued its nuclear tests even after Algeria gained independence, exposing thousands of Algerians to radiation, which caused severe health problems. By the 1960s and 1970s, as Cold War tensions rose, world leaders recognized the catastrophic consequences of nuclear war. Treaties were signed to limit nuclear proliferation, and nations began to use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. And thus, one of the most terrifying chapters in human history came to an end.